Hi and welcome to Cooking in Mike's Backyard. Today we're going to be making brisket. I love brisket, but I have to tell you, when I first started smoking meat, brisket caused me a lot of trouble. I've learned some tricks I'm going to share with you today, and at the end we're going to have a delicious brisket. All right, so I usually, when I start out making a brisket, I get a whole brisket. You can get them at Costco or Smart and Final. I don't like to buy brisket at the grocery store because they over trim them. And also in a second I'll show you what else they do, which is causes problems. So this is a whole brisket. The problem with smoking a whole brisket is that you have pieces that are this thick and pieces that are like 5 inches thick. If you were to cook this end to a perfect degree of doneness, this is going to be way overcooked and dry. And vice versa, if you were to cook this to perfect, this is going to be raw. So I start out with the whole brisket, and I intend to only use half. This end, the big end, is called the point, and this is called the flat. So what I do is I figure out about where it starts tapering down, you know, taking into consideration how many people I want to feed. So I'm just going to cut it right here and divide the brisket in half. So that it'll cook evenly. This is the end we're going to cook. We're going to have to trim it up a little bit, but it's all pretty much uniform in thickness, and it's going to smoke evenly all the way through. All right, so after you get the brisket divided in half, you're going to start working on the side you're going to smoke. Now this, see this like tendril material? This is called silver skin. You're going to want to cut that off. It's a little tricky, but you just want to get it off because that's going to make a tough bite. So you just get a little bit of a gap between it and the meat, and then just start cutting it off. And you should be able to get it off of the meat pretty easily. All right, so I've started cleaning up the silver. I'm going to do a little bit more work on that, but I want to take a second to show you the fat. So you have these two huge fat caps at the end of a brisket, there and on top. You want to trim those down, but don't over trim. Remember, fat is flavor. So I'm going to cut off about everything except for about 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch all the way along, so we get a nice even layer of fat, but it's not just a big ball of fat. All right, so we've trimmed up the brisket, and now if you look at it, it's pretty uniform. We've cleaned up the silver skin. We have this leftover fat. Don't throw it away. There are things that you can do with it. I'll explain in other videos, but just keep it, put it in a bag, and stick it in your freezer, and we'll talk about it later. So after you've gotten all the fat trimmed off, because I really hate a dry brisket, I always make it a point to inject beef injection into it. So I place it in a pan, skin side down, fat side down. So that's where we trimmed it all off. Put it in there like that. To make my injection, I use 1 tablespoon of onion powder, 1 tablespoon garlic powder, 2 teaspoons coarse black pepper. You're going to take just beef stock. You can make your own, or I just get store-bought. You're going to fill it up about halfway, just so that you got some room to whisk, and then just whisk it all around so that it starts breaking up and it basically interacting and mixing with that beef stock. All right, and then just pour the rest of it in. And that is the beef injection. All right, so let's talk a little bit about injections. They sell injectors. The most common ones look like basically hypodermic needles. They're perfectly fine to use if you're making chicken, but if you're doing something big like a brisket, you really want to probably think about investing in a better injector, something that doesn't hurt your hands so much. I got this about a year after wrestling with those injectors, the syringe ones. It's a great little injector. It just works like a caulking gun, and it's easier on the hands. Each pull produces about 1/2 tablespoon of injection. They're just really great. They come with 3 different size needles. We're going to use the medium size needle for the brisket, but they have larger ones if you're doing a hog or something, or this one is actually really great for going into chickens between the skin and the meat. But as I said, we're going to be using this one today, and it's really easy to load. All right, so to fill it, all you do is give it a quick little stir, get that onion powder and pepper and everything going. and you just stick the needle into the end of it and pull it out, and it fills up with injection. All right, so we're going to put about 1.5 quart of the injection in there, and all you do is just press it into the meat, and I give it 2 pulls. So about a tablespoon, because as I said, it's about a half tablespoon per pull. And you just pace them about 1 inch apart. Now, you're going to have runoff, which is fine. I'll show you what to do with that in a little while. But you want to use a metal bottom pan, not an aluminum pan, because if you press and you're pressing too hard, you're going to poke a hole in the bottom of the aluminum pan. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to do all this, then we're going to flip it over and do the other side, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so we've done the bottom side, we flipped it over, and we're almost done with this. So what I want to show you is, you just keep injecting, and the meat's going to get wetter and wetter, and it's going to form little pillows, and sometimes you'll see it squirt out, but that's okay, because it's all going into this metal bottom pan. We're going to utilize all the things that have gone through the meat, but it's leaving, even if it's not 100% stuck in the meat, the liquid, it's leaving flavor behind. So you just really want to get it nice and plump. Don't press down on it. And when you're handling it in the next phase, just make sure you don't squeeze it, because you want to leave all that juice in there. All right, so now that you've got it all trimmed up and injected, we're going to now place it in I think it's a 3-gallon Ziploc bag, but you just want a bag big enough to hold the meat without too much space left over. It can be a little hard because it's very wet right now, which is going to be great later on, but for right now it makes it a little bit difficult to handle. There we go. So you just get it into the bag. Now, when I was talking earlier about the leftover juices, now is the time you're going to use them. Just take the bag, set it up, let the meat settle to the bottom, and then just pour all of that juice right into the bag. And what you want is you want it to be floating all the way. So we're going to add a little bit more beef stock until it's got a nice amount of liquid in there. And then you're going to close the bag and bleed off all the air. Okay. So now the brisket is floating in juice. You're going to leave it in the bag until at least 8 hours. This is going to be in about 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours. And then we're going to take it out of the bag and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, now that the brisket's been soaking, we've let this soak about 12 hours, but as I said, you can do it a little less, about 8 hours is probably enough. Just take the brisket out of the bag. Give it a second for the juice to run off. Okay. After the brisket is out of the bag and resting, you're going to make your rub. What this is it's a 1/2 cup of kosher salt, 1/2 cup of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon coarsely ground pepper, 1 teaspoon of paprika, and 1/2 teaspoon of chipotle powder. We're not going to put any onion powder or garlic powder in this because we injected it earlier, and I think that's going to give enough garlic flavor to the meat. So just mix it up. And so it looks like that. All right, so applying the rub, I put it in a pan so that I catch all the spilling rub. I always put it fat side down first because I want to end up with it fat side up. And all you do is just sprinkle the top with rub and work it gently into the meat. Don't work it too hard. You just want to get a good coating on there. You're not going to need any bonding agent like mustard because the beef is already pretty wet. Try to get it all the way around the edges. If you have any cavities, you probably want to put it in there. All right, so after you get it, the bottom layer rubbed, just flip it over in the pan and apply the rest of your rub. Right after you apply the rub, it goes into the smoker. It's going to smoke at 300 degrees for 2.5 hours uncovered. People like to smoke it in the pan. I'm not sure why. I think it's because they don't want to get their racks dirty. I like to place it right on the rack and put a pan underneath to catch the drippings. But if you put it on the rack, it's good because all the smoke goes around the entire meat. You don't end up with a side that's never exposed to smoke. So let's put it in the smoker and come back in 2.5 hours. Okay, so the brisket has now been in the smoker for 2.5 hours at 300 degrees. We're smoking with pecan today. what you're going to do is you're going to take it out of the smoker, place it in an aluminum pan. Let's close that smoker door while you're working on it so that the heat stays in. We're going to add about a half a cup of beef stock just to keep the moisture level up in the pan. Oh, that looks good. We're going to wrap it with aluminum foil really tightly to form a tight seal. So that all the liquid stays in. Right after you get it good and tight, put it back in the smoker, and it's going to sit in there for about another hour and a half. We're shooting for a temperature of 205 degrees. Okay, it's been in the smoker now for another hour and a half. We checked the temperature, it's right at 205, which is where we want it. But now we're going to do something a little weird. We're going to take it out of the smoker and place it on this bed of towels. Now what you do is just lay out some either a blanket or old towels and then wrap it up. Make it a nice warm little blanket. And lastly, you wrap it in an old bathrobe. So it's going to sit here for about, I'd say about 3 more hours, resting. It'll stay nice and warm. It'll still be warm enough to serve. But in about 3 hours, we'll cut it and we'll eat it. Okay, so it's been in the wrap now for 3 hours. We're gonna unwrap it. It's still hot, a lot of steam coming out. And there it is. So let's take a look and see what we got going on here. I'm liking the way it looks. Okay, let's cut it in half and see what it looks like on the inside. Oh, it looks perfect. Nice and pink, tasty looking. All right, so let's try a little taste here. Cut off this fat that's in the center. All right, so let's go one for me, one for the cameraman, and one for the dog.
I'll take mine.
Oh, that's really good.
That's
All right,
delicious.
let's eat.
Got it.